Hello, good afternoon. Welcome you all to the IMS movie theater. And today we have this special session. This is a partnership between Instituto Moreira Salles and Japan Foundation with the support of Goethe Institute. And the film we're going to see is Johatsu, Into Thin Air, directed by Arata Mori and Andreas Hartmann. After the session, we invite all of you to stay for a debate. We're going to have Arata, Andreas, Flavia Guerra, and the moderator Ana Paula Sousa. So if you can, I just would like you to answer a feedback form that we have. You have the QR code on the screen, so if possible, please, we'll be very happy if you could answer the questions there. And we also have that in hard copy. We just have that at the reception in the entrance hall. So without much ado, I would like to call to the stage the directors, and then Daigo Tamura from Japan Foundation here in Sao Paulo. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Daigo Tamura, General Director of Japan Foundation in Sao Paulo. I would like to thank everyone. This is a special session of Johatsu film. This is a documentary of a social subject directed by Arata Mori and Andreas Hartmann. Earlier this month, there was an edition of the Real Film Festival that also premiered this documentary. On that occasion, Japan Foundation, as an institution that promotes the cultural exchange between Japan and other countries, proposes this event, which is about Japanese movies. We invited directors and also experts in the subject. People who saw this film at the festival know that this kind of social problem is not uncommon in Japan. It also happens in other countries. And this film has to do with people that had redefined their lives, and that also it speaks of what they do after this. This is interesting to see. By watching the film, each one of you is going to have different opinions on this. This roundtable will be a good opportunity for you to get to know your opinion about the film. Lastly, I would like to thank Instituto Moreira Salles and Marcelo Araújo, its director, and all the IMS team for this partnership. Also, I'd like to thank Goethe Institute in Sao Paulo for the support in dissemination of this film. And Arata Mori and Andreas Hartmann, our appreciation, together with Ana Paula Sousa and also Flavia Guerra. Thank you very much for having the time to be here with us today. I hope that you all can enjoy this roundtable that we have right after the film. Thank you very much.
Yeah, we're very happy that our film will be presented in São Paulo, and then we'd like to show the appreciation to Japan Foundation to organize the whole events, and getting Institute for supporting, and IMS for having this event here. Should we wait for the translation? Okay, yeah. So, like Johatsu, it's a Japanese term. Is it means like a disappearance of people, and through these films, that we are so surprised that so many people were open to talk about their own disappearing story. So I think this film, that we hope that this film will give you opportunity and to look back at your own personal story, because anybody like in this room might have thought about that, and I want to disappear. We hope that you enjoy these films and then the talk event afterwards.
Yeah, thank you also from my side. We are very grateful to be here. So the film you will see today is a kind of a special film because we will not be able to show this version in Japan to the Japanese audience because most of the protagonists only agreed to participate in the film under the condition that we will only show it to an international audience because they decided to show their face in the film. So yeah, we are very grateful that the film is so good received all over the world and that we're also now here in Brazil to present the film. Thank you very much and have a good screening.
Hello everyone, good afternoon. Thank you very much. Thank you for staying for this conversation with the directors. So we're gonna have an introduction. So I will ask a couple of questions, Flavia the same, and then in the last half hour, we're going to open the floor for you to ask your questions. So just for you to get prepared. So we have to close at 6 p.m., on the dot, because there is another session right after this one. So I think that it's difficult to start this conversation speaking about this film. We do have to understand on your end, directors, how did you deal with all these challenges, ethical challenges of this film? So the first thing that amazes us or surprises us is how these disappeared people accept to appear in a film like this. Because even though you had told us beforehand that you had an agreement with these people and you had to commit with them that the film was not going to be trying to see what was happening, but with internet, of course you cannot really ensure that the film that was not going to be screened in Japan. But so I would like you to tell us a little bit how. I think that the way you found, or the way how you could find these people that are disappeared, how did you find them?
So yes, of course it was very difficult, and then of course that was the first challenge that we faced when we were making this film, and then. I would say, we use the different channels of finding these people. And so some people, of course, we found from the night movers that we contacted these night movers and this company that which helped the people to disappear. So they introduced us some of their clients, the ex-clients. And then also we went to slum in Osaka called Nishinari, and then there actually you can bump into so many people who have the story of disappearance. So there's two main channels that we found those people.
Yeah, and I want to go a little bit more back actually, so how this project started. So maybe I need to turn off this translation. So 10 years ago, I was in Japan for the first time. I had a scholarship from the Goethe Institute. I was doing an artist in residence program in Kyoto in the Villa Kamogawa. And during that time, I made my previous documentary about a young man who decided to live as a homeless by choice. So it's kind of a similar story of a young man who disappeared. And during that time, I discovered then this day labor neighborhood in Osaka, Nishinari, and I was from the very beginning very intrigued that in Japan this kind of place exists. I didn't know that before. And surprisingly, the people who were living in this neighborhood, they were very open to me. And I think that was because I was a foreigner, and they kind of also feel like foreigners in their own country, like outsiders. So they kind of were open to talk to me. And then so this was the kind of the beginning point. And when I then heard about the night moving companies which exist in Japan, I kind of combined these two aspects and wanted to make a film about this, and then started to collaborate with Arata, and this was the beginning point. And I think it really helped that we are kind of, because Arata also, you also live in Europe since quite a long time, so the people were kind of open to us because we are kind of a little bit out from the outside perspective of Japan.
And how about the ethical point of view? And
yeah. So of course the protagonists of course are aware that there is a slight risk of people watching the films through film piracy or through VPN, but they kind of took this risk. They're aware of the risk because for most of them, it was kind of the first time to talk out their story and to talk about their experience of disappearance. And so this was kind of an important step for them as kind of a relieving moment to be able to talk to someone. Yeah. So they decided to participate under this risk. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, I can say the same things, but yeah, like it took us quite a while, and then, yeah, of course, it's, I think the fact that we are international team, and then I think I wouldn't be able to also imagine to do these films alone. I think they really kind of like open up, like when like Andreas came from Germany, and then I was always like sitting next to him. But for me, especially, it was a challenge for me that I didn't know like how to talk to those people like in the beginning as Japanese people, because in Japan like there's many sophisticated level of communication that you have to be aware of. So in the beginning, like I was very careful, but surprisingly, like they are very really open to give a talk to us, and then in front of the camera that we are very surprised, and then like the time that we spent with them, like 3 years, and was like really helping us to get like really trust from them. Yeah.
They wanted to disappear. And then there's a relationship. What is to disappear in Japan and what is to disappear in Brazil? And right at the beginning of the film, it says some people were forced to disappear, some other people chose to disappear. So I'm going now to bring Flavia to the conversation. And I would like to ask you, Flavia, first, you are an expert in cinema and also especially in making comments. So here in Brazil, is there any film that will remind you something of, does Johatsu remind you something? Because we also have the people who disappeared during dictatorship here in Brazil, so they were forced to disappear. And Flavia also has a personal experience because she has a stepfather who is of Japanese descent. So you know the Japanese culture in Brazil very well. So I think that will be interesting for you to try to come to this conversation, this dialogue between these two different cultures. Yeah, I'll try to break this bridge. Interesting that you asked me the question, because by watching the film, I was trying to remember films related to this. Maybe you can also remember, cases in Brazil of people who disappeared, voluntarily speaking, for one reason or the other, just want to vanish. Here in Brazil, those who were not killed by dictatorship or just disappeared in a forced way, or also they were killed by assassins, is because they have some debts or some problems because if they did something illegal, and they simply go to a different region and disappear. But completely disappearance, there is no film like that. There's a recent case of a film that was just premiered on Disney Plus in streaming, which is called Come Back Priscilla. So this is Belfort's sister. He is a fighter. He's very famous, a jiu-jitsu fighter here. He's very famous. He's a celebrity. And his sister went away one day. She left for a walk. She was on Rio de Janeiro Avenue, Presidente Vargas Avenue, very famous here. Then during lunchtime, she went for lunch and she never came back. And until today, nobody knows what happened to her. And the series discusses this, whether she was killed, but nobody contacted the family because of the no ransom, and whether she had problems with drug trafficking, whether she was an addict, and then she had to disappear. And this is very recent. It just premiered last week, but this is very specific about her case and addresses all these situations. In the way you did in Johatsu, I think that, you have different people with different profiles, and then you bring this humanity, bringing their perspective, the perspective of those who disappeared, which is wonderful. Someone who disappeared now appeared. And I think that there is no case like that, of having a documentary that will be so obvious like that. But I find it interesting because we have films about absences. And I think that what is very beautiful about your film is that you have the mother having to deal with the absence of her child, of her son. How empty she feels. The emptiness left by someone who has just left someplace. And this film is about the emptiness and the gaps. It has nothing to do with only Japanese culture. There's another film called Being Back, which I think that it was made by the Kasegi people. So people who were the Japanese descent, born in Brazil, that went to work in Japan, that came back here. And this has nothing to do with my family because I just have some other cousins that went to Japan to work like that, but nothing in the first rank. But I think that every Japanese family here in Sao Paulo has at least one uncle, one cousin who went to Japan and never came back. And you don't know how the person is. They communicate with each other, they can call each other, but many times these people had never came back to live in Brazil. They never came back to visit their family members. So this is an emptiness that they live in, those people who are still here. And this is what I felt by seeing the mother. And now we have the opposite way. So that we have the grandparents who came back to Brazil and as immigrants, and now we have their grandson or grandchildren going back to Japan in order to work there. So as you called my culture, my stepfather has already passed away. I was adopted by him, and he has already passed away. And I am a Imane. And this is a culture that we always have to observe from. We all have to observe from on the outside. I think that in your film, especially, in your film, you can raise all these different perspectives. Something interesting about the Japanese culture is this idea of honor, respect, and shame. For some, I think that this is good in the sense that you respect the other people. You also you are considerate towards other people. But you also fear to be judged. So many times people are so afraid of being judged that they simply prefer to disappear. But rather, they would like to be welcomed. And I think that is very nice when the father calls her son and his child talks to him in a very warming way. I think that is very touching. So I think that, by watching this film from outside, I'm just going to mention my Japanese grandfather. He used to say that when he came to Brazil, he was educated in Japanese. He grew in the countryside, and for his parents, Japan, or Japon, I said in Portuguese, was yes or no. And here in Brazil, he learned the word maybe. And sometimes we here in Brazil just focus too much on the maybe. Maybe we should be more incisive or decisive. But I find this interesting because in English we say pick and choose. You pick and choose things or choose something that is good in each culture. And this is what we have seen Japanese doing here in Brazil. They have learned how to be more flexible by living here. And this is something that I learned from Japanese. Many people ask me, do you know Japan? Well, I grew up in the middle of Japanese people here in Brazil, but I've never been there. Well, Flavia has just raised something interesting about this emotion that we can feel in the film. But now that I watch here, I see that on the big screen because I saw that on my computer. And of course, the big screen has a different ability because by seeing the film here, I thought this seems to be fiction. It seems to be actors who are just performing a role. A person who calls his children. This seems to be fiction. No, this is a Korean film or something. But the subject in the film is very interesting, no doubt about that. But we know that despite being so good, the subject, the film is so good, but the subject is something that is very impactful. You have different choices of language. In the case of the documentary, the approach chosen to it is something that obviously lead us to feel your aesthetic way of building the film. Not only by the way you chose the protagonists, but also your choice is related to an off voice, or some images. Sometimes you have the person speaking by himself. Sometimes you have an interview. And sometimes like you have the girl talking to her mother. That's a very strong moment, actually. She said, I called him. And then she said, I did call him too. And maybe they have never talked about that before. So I would like you both to speak about your aesthetic choices. And also, I would like to ask Flavia to speak about the challenges of a documentary that has a social approach and not to be just something that discusses a subject and also discusses some of the media. Based on your experience in working with festivals. Well, I will start by speaking about the language. There is something very interesting. Well, I teach a documentary, and I usually speak about the verité cinema or the straightforward cinema, American movie. And when they broke all of this, that you do not really use it that much, the interview in itself. And the guy who created this American cinema, he said, we don't want to see a talk delivered, on some stage. And he said, no more film talks. We want to see the life just going on, happening before our eyes. And the story has to tell the story by itself. And I think that we don't have something so much straightforward, but a lot of this has been used, the storytelling itself. The last character that we can see who came back home after 37 years, I also would like you to hear more about this. So we can hear the story happening, when by the talk that he has with his sister. But actually, this is not just something that you tell a story. This is just a dialogue. And this is something that you mentioned. This seems to be cinema. So when we hear just the action taking place, you can see that this is very close to drama. And this is not just a class that is being filmed or an interview. It's not a documentary. It's not journalism. And I think today we are very free because we have documentaries of all kinds. And to come to the way they tell the story, based on what Ana said, Arata and Andreas, you use some resources that you had at hand to come to the core of that. This is the moment when the documentary really tells the story, which is very interesting for us to see as viewers.
So I think the question of, what is documentary, what is a fiction has been discussed now, and then also it's almost that it's become like normalized. This discussion is normalized now that the documentary film is more and more fiction, and the fiction can also be documentary. So like we're blurring these boundaries, which for me is an interesting point. And then regarding this film, that we were not actually planning to make it a very, like cinematic storytelling, but then also but that was kind of like that a sort of solution for us to combine all these like very complicated stories into one. And then we also didn't want to make the reportage about disappearance, but we wanted to make like really personal, the psychological films. So like during the shooting and then during the editing process, that we really realized that this is the only way that we can achieve to show this realm of, the disappearance. And because we have like many different perspectives, like one disappeared and then one left behind. So that was, and then I think through that, like we really achieved to the point that is very, storytelling and touching, but at the same time it is so real because those are real people, and then all these things which was happening from the cameras, they're real. So, yeah.
Yeah, so that's what I usually also do in my documentaries is to try to make a kind of an immersive experience for the audience. That's the audience, when the audience watch the documentary, that they kind of forget actually that it's a film and that they're just really immersed in the experience and then also reflect on their own stories, that they can identify with the characters. So that the film is not only like a particular film about a specific Japanese phenomenon, but it also becomes kind of universal, and actually the things which happens on the screen and the things which the protagonists are facing, like it's kind of universal challenges and universal struggles. So that's why we're using this kind of style to make the audience to immerse in the film.
Now I'm going to bring a piece of information to you, and this is something that is off the film. I was talking to the director, associate director of the Japan Foundation. She explained that in Japan, there is not a number of documents that you have from the day you were born. So, because here in Brazil, if you have a son, for this child to be your dependent on your income tax return, he has to have a CPF or a taxpayer registration number. Of course, in Japan, you also have your documents, but you have your driver's license, your passport. So I just would like to understand if it is really that way, and to what extent do you believe that this can also be a part of this high number of people disappeared? Or do you feel that people simply choose to disappear because of personal problems like the shame? Because this is some of the things that we feel from most of these characters. So is this really a central factor for them to disappear?
So yes, like firstly the technical part that I'm not fully aware of, like if someone is born and then if they get this registration number. I don't know, but we know that like so like we don't have like ID system. Like we have like a new system called like a MINE number, but it's not obligation yet for us to. So I don't have a MINE numbers. And so that's, so like I'm not sure about in Brazil, but for example in Germany, like everyone is connected with this number, so it's very difficult to disappear, but in Japan probably a bit easier. And yes, I think it's really, it is like why people disappear in Japan is like rooted probably the mentality of Japanese people, that we cannot express like our emotions. I have learned about that, and like since I lived in Europe like for 15 years, and then I learned like really how to express myself and my emotions. But before that, I was like really kind of suffocated and living in my own world. And that's Japanese people. Like Japanese people don't say what they think, and then one day it just explodes, and then you just you don't say anybody, you just like take your luggage and then you go away. So that's like really what the world that I know from Japan. I don't know now because I don't live there, but I think it's very much related with this culture, I suppose.
Yeah, and we were surprised, like when we started to work on this documentary, and then also we talked in Japan, like to our friends in Japan, and also Arata, you talked to your friends in Japan, and then after we started the project, then many people told us, actually also my uncle disappeared 10 years ago, or my father disappeared 10 years ago. And these were stories they maybe didn't tell us before, because it's something you usually don't talk about in a casual meeting. But this kind of film opened up that they also shared stories like this. So yeah, we discovered many stories also in our private circles where people have disappeared. Yeah.
Well, before opening the floor to the audience, I just have a curiosity. This is about how you funded in order to make this film. Also because, for example, there is no pre-license to any channel or platform in Japan to screen the film. So I'd like to understand how it was funded and how important it is to be shown worldwide. And also, to Flavia, I'd like to hear from you, in your view, how has it been the system on how documentaries are made, especially those who have with a social approach, and also in order for them to be screened in different places, because of course we cannot just show this in all these mainstream movie theaters.
First about the production fundings. So we pitched this project in several different film festivals in Germany, at the DocFest Munich and the DocFest in Leipzig. And there we found our mostly the collaborators of the film, which is the German distributor BR and Arata. And and then we have several German national film fundings which we could access because the topic is kind of so attractive and also universal. So it also speaks to a German audience, and maybe German and Japanese culture also have some similarities. So Japanese stories and content is very also popular among German broadcasters. Yeah. So we were successful to fund the film with it.
Very interesting that you raised this topic, because I think that what Andreas said is very interesting. The documentary can also be more effective because it is not a reportage and is an immersive experience. And a documentary that has a social impact can be more impactful when it does this, because here it raises empathy with people, and with this way it's easier for people to put themselves in the shoes of the characters. And this also is easier for a social approach to be more accepted. And I think this is more engaging. People engage in this in the film, even though the numbers may not be so high in the beginning, but these numbers refer to very people. You can be your father, your son. This is a good moment for social documentaries in Brazil too. Something important for us is environment, for example, Amazonia. So if we are so far, if here in São Paulo, we are far from the Amazon region, and even from the Pantanal region. So if they are burning, this is something that do not really affect the common people here. They do not touch their heart. We just see that on TV, but it's not in your present in your daily life. So environmental issue is something that has to be addressed, and now they are trying to show some people, real people from the region telling their story. And this is also being shown in the global play. Now we have, for example, a jaguar that is transformed like in a character that can speak by itself, and it tells its stories and so on. So this also raises the empathy of people. So this is a way for them to try to engage the audience with the story of the jaguar, for example. So I think this is something very creative and is also very impactful. Funding here in Brazil is something that is scarce, especially from some documentaries in this with a social approach. It's easier because for you to get a cross fund or some NGOs that can raise funds for you or some foundations. So then this topic can be funded. But here in Brazil, we usually use the tax incentives a lot. And so we have local laws that create this kind of incentive. But usually this is for short films and simpler films. Your film, which took 3 years to be made, it really costs a lot, right? So this is more difficult to be made here in Brazil. Here, we're still trying to find a way to get more funding. And the director of Japan Foundation said in the beginning that one of the ideas of this session was to have an opportunity to understand how each one of you in the audience has perceived the film. So let's try to hear your voices. If you have any question, please just raise your hand. We have a microphone. The first one is always more difficult, then people just relax. I think that is curious to see that there are specialized companies in making people disappear. And in the film, there is also detectives looking for someone disappeared. So if I were a detective, the first thing I would do was to go to these night moving companies to ask, have you already disappeared with this person? So does this person want to be found? Is there any danger for this person if this person is found? So, do detectives usually follow this way?
Well, yeah. I've never heard from detectives that they, approach the night movers. I guess they are like working in different fields. They are like kind of the opposite one. A night mover is the one who helped the disappearance, and then detective is the one who try to find them. So they're kind of like maybe opponent, maybe in some aspect. But we have learned, because we were in touch with quite many night movers. We chose the one here in this film, but we already filmed with the several ones. And then we found one night moving company, which is actually detective company. So they're detectives, they're also like offering this night moving service, so which was, quite interesting for us.
But in general, night moving companies also have more like a dark or negative image in Japan. So it seems, the detectives don't want to interfere with that. Or also, maybe it's also something like respect. They don't want to, invade these areas of those. There's kind of barriers in between those both businesses. Yeah.
Anyone else? Well, while the microphone reaches him, so I have another question, which will be very quick to answer. Was there any character that took part in the film that regretted it later and asked not to be shown on the film?
Yeah, actually, we went to Japan last summer, or this summer. This year in summer, we were in Japan and organized like private screenings for the protagonists. So they watched the film for the first time, and actually all of them were quite satisfied and quite happy with the result, which was also very relieving to us because it's very important for a documentary filmmaker. That you portray the people in a way they also are satisfied with. So none of them complained. Yeah.
Okay. What else? Is there any relation or social relationship with these people who disappear? You know, I don't know whether in Japan there is market difference like in Brazil, because we have different social levels of people that are very rich, people that are very poor, and usually we feel that people who would like to disappear are the ones who are very poor. And usually they are related to people who live on the street because they are homeless. And usually they really evaporate because they are just invisible to the society. There is nobody there or no company to help them. You know, these people here in Brazil simply disappear, you know, just just spontaneously, so to speak. But there is nobody to support them, actually. So is this something that happens in Japan too?
Yeah, well, I think so. I think also like in Japan, it's it is related to this social hierarchy that and like many factors, and also educations, and then like what I can still like remember like from this couple that who were living and then hiding themselves in this hotel were that they probably couldn't get like enough educations, and then they also didn't get a support from their parents because they had a conflict with them. And then, so, they were trying to kind of improve their lives, but not really like kind of getting good connections with the people, and then ending up like in this kind of, we call like a black company. It's like a very company which exploits people. Yeah, so that's why they disappear from them. And so I think it's kind of like a vicious circle that it's those people like who disappear, they repeat this circle because they really don't know how they can, get better and then find the right people. And actually, this couple in the hotel, we have heard that they have disappeared again from them after the finishing, the complication of these films, and because they repeat disappearance, those ones.
Well, there's a very specific case that is very shocking too. One of them tells that the mother disappeared. And then he says, he laughs or he grins, my mother disappeared. So this is a repetition of the cycle, right? And Anna also made a comment about the Loving Motel. Here in Brazil, we just call it motel. And the Karin also said that the motel is, the Love Hotel has this environment where you can be isolated. And you do not have a common hall where people would just see each other. In a Japanese hotel, the employee doesn't have a contact with anyone either. So this is a place for people to hide. So somehow people are hiding somehow. It's also interesting to see the Love Hotel in your film because it's very similar to what I saw in this other film. Also, I would like you to speak a little bit about this because we see, people who evaporate, who disappear, as something being negative and sad. But there is another side to it because these people just invent a new life. They change lives, It's not a rebirth, but it's just changing their lives completely. I don't know, that maybe I am a person who is too optimistic because these people do not kill themselves because the rate of suicide in Japan is very high. Unfortunately, suicide has also increased around the world too. And there is also kikomori. who are mostly young people who never leave their home, not even leave their bedroom, because these are the people who disappear and because they stay in their own shells. So to me, the Johatsu phenomenon is something that is positive in a certain way because the person just invents a new way of life. I would like to hear your opinion about this and also the opinion from the audience. What do you think about this?
Maybe first also still a little bit to this phenomenon of the love hotels, these anonymous places. We also discovered in our research like there are these internet cafes where like young people also stay in internet cafes, basically places, very small cabins where you can use the computer and the internet, but they also have a bed where you can sleep. And there's a big community in Tokyo where young people who sometimes also underage people who ran away from their parents because they have conflicts with their parents, or maybe the parents are violent, like domestic violence at home. So they disappear and gather in this community in Tokyo and stay in cheap internet cafes, or they share cheap hotel rooms. And it's right now a big issue also in Japan. Yeah. And maybe if you want to talk, say just other.
Yeah. So this. I agree with your perspective of like this. The act of disappearance is a positive in a way, like when you compare it with the like killing yourself, like committing suicide, because in Japan there's other people like who goes to the forest and then hang themselves, which is also a huge issue. And then I think that's what people that we met in these films, and then what we also want to convey with these films is that to disappear, it's just like an alternative way of like restarting your life, and then it's it's also like a choice of your life sometimes, and you can do that. And then this is what we learn. And then actually that we saw that the people who disappeared, they're living quite happy life. Yeah, they of course still have the missing feeling from their families, and then, but they're living in a very new environment, and then they're having like really, kind of, good life. So it's, I think this is kind of, so like not many film has described it.
Yeah, it's more about choose something different, even uma vida clandestina, than give up.
I love the film. First of all, congratulations. It was a beautiful film, and it's nice really that it speaks about the global stuff, I think, global feelings, relationship between father that is far from his kids and the mother that is looking for the kid. It was beautiful. And also I was thinking that the last film about Japan, The Perfect Days, that was like big success, a beautiful film, also tells about a person who did the same, who disappeared, who was living this happy life, but far from his family, and it was interesting to think about it. I also want to tell you that it was so beautiful that you could make people to speak with you. That saying, this woman is telling, I'm with an open heart right now. It was beautiful because probably she doesn't do it really often, I found it amazing, really amazing. And do you think the film also provoked, in a nice way, several of personages to call to his son, for example, this guy to go home, I know that you tried to be as much observational film as possible, but on the other hand, the camera also always does it, it not provokes, it's not nice word maybe, but it pushes it gives this way back somehow. I don't know, I had this feeling. What do you think? So maybe the film was also something that made those people to call to his kid or to go back to home to. And that's it. Thanks. It was beautiful.
Yeah, that's it's really interesting a point that and then of course that we have, you know, there's some part that we probably try to curate, but the curation in a way that's not far from the reality, but like the things was already happening or is going to happen, and then but you know we sometimes have to make an appointment because we were there like only for 3 months, and then so we sometimes ask the people, okay, can we do it like tomorrow or but it's what I'm always interested in is that as in the documentary generally, like when you point out the camera, that people change behaviors, they really become the actors. So that's really something that you cannot avoid. But that is also like very interesting. Yeah, like so it's yeah. So that these questions, like we still haven't figured out like what is how we should do it. But it's kind of yeah. This film really shows or raises this question also, like what is a reality? Yeah.
Yeah, so maybe we can give an example. So the man who disappeared 37 years ago, so we filmed with him already in 2018. That was the first beginning to film with him. And then when COVID happened, we had 2 years where I couldn't enter Japan, and we had a break of shooting. And then in 2022, we came back to Japan and we met all the protagonists again. And then we asked them, okay, what has changed in your life? What is new? And Kanda, the man who disappeared 37 years ago, he told us that he actually, during COVID in 2021, I guess, he went back to his family. And he told us about this experience. And we were like oh, wow, this is like very interesting development of his character. And of course, we wanted to also tell about this development in the film. So we asked him if he want to go a second time, if we would be able to follow him with the camera. And he agreed. And so we organized this trip together, that we followed him on his second journey. And then in the editing, we tried to keep it as open as possible if it's a first meeting or the second meeting. So, yeah. But it is actually the second meeting between the sister and Kanda. Yeah. And this is, of course, then where reality, and because reality documentary is never really showing the truth. It cannot show the truth because it's so subjective how you edit, like where you put the in point or the out point. This decision changes the complete shot and the complete meaning of the shot. So what we're trying in the film to stay as close as possible to our own values and ethics. To create this immersive experience, which also stays true to the characters in a way, yeah, or as close as possible to them. Yeah.
Good afternoon. Congratulations to the directors for this wonderful documentary. Here in Brazil, we have a popular expression saying that when a man abandons his family and then disappears, we say that this man went to buy cigarettes and never came back. And just in the same way, it was said that there are many men. I also have some friends who are Japanese Brazilians whose parents or whose fathers went to work in Japan as dekasegi, and then they abandoned their families here in Brazil because they disappeared, and they have other families in Japan. So my question is precisely about this gender approach of people that go to these night moving companies that make people disappear. So usually are more men who go to seek these companies, or to what extent is there a correlation between the people who go to leave this to seek this company to disappear and this patriarchal hierarchy society? Also, I would like to add another piece of information. I don't know whether this will be redundant, but to the Brazilian society, and especially here in Sao Paulo, because here we have lots of Japanese descent living here, I don't know anyone who really disappeared in the way of the film. But I know stories, like he said, of people who went to Japan to work and then they evaporated. I don't know whether they, left no trace, because people just went there to work to support their families back here in Brazil, but they never came back. And this especially happened in the 1980s and 90s, and this was really true.
So yes, maybe first to the question about the gender issue. So what Saita, the night mover, told us, that at the moment it's quite equal, the amount of women and men who ask for her services. In the past it was usually more male, but now it's kind of equal. And but of course the reasons are a bit different. The men mostly disappear from financial issues because they have debts or financial problems, and most of her female clients disappear from domestic violence at home. So this is also like a very high number of her clients disappear for that reason. Yeah. So but in general, I think it's maybe also when we're not only speaking about people who disappear with these companies, but also because people who just run away by themselves, because of course this is also a high number. For the men, for male people, it's I think often a financial thing, because they are responsible for the family also, and they sometimes escape from these responsibilities.
And then yesterday we had the opportunity to have a dinner with the director of Japan Foundation, and then he told us that the Brazilian immigrants in Japan, they're mostly living in Tsurumi, which is in Yokohama, and it's actually my hometown. But I didn't know that there was these Brazilian immigrants are there, because we don't have like direct connections. But that really kind of made me think that the Brazilian people who disappeared from here, maybe maybe you can find them, and then you can go and find them. So I think I will be now curious to walk around with my neighbors when I go to Japan, and then I think it's very, very fascinating story. Yeah.
Well, when immigration started to come here, not only Japanese, but the Lebanese people, Italians. We heard many stories from our grandparents or great-grandparents saying that their grandfather who traveled or who came from Italy had a different family here in Brazil. They had a family back there in Italy, one here in Brazil. Same thing with the Lebanese families. The family only found this out when that grandfather died. Today is more contemporary, and people are still alive, and get to know that they have second families. But people who simply vanish and create a different life, if they don't have a previous life with a family, no problem in having a new life. The problem is when they leave behind a family and without telling them the story. And there are many stories like that here in Brazil. And this can be also the subject of a soap opera if you want. Good afternoon. Well, this is something very quick. First, I would like to thank you for coming here. The film is very interesting, good, and it also makes us think about this issue of normality. In the Brazilian case, I remember the case of Belchior, a Brazilian singer, because who lived the last 4 decades here in Brazil know that there was a moment when Belchior just went into isolation. He did not want to communicate with anyone, and there was an article done about him. So Belchior was a very famous Brazilian singer who disappeared for some time, and then he reappeared, and recently he passed away. It was, but well, he died in 2017, not so recent.
For the screening. And the way I read the movie, a lot of people, the characters seem to be venting to the camera their problems. Uh, you, you think that they were struggling with mental health? Maybe. Because domestic violence, the other one was doing with the black company. And instead of, and they mentioned suicide a lot of times, we couldn't do that. So they use the coping mechanism of running away. Because I saw in another documentary about the idols that in Japan they usually try to using a lot of coping mechanisms instead of dealing with the issues at hand.
We're not 100% sure if we understood the question correctly. But yeah, maybe you can repeat, try to summarize in one more sentence.
Okay,
to
I'm
understand.
sorry. Okay, sorry. It seems like a lot of them were dealing with mental health. They have that alternative instead of just using running away as a coping mechanism. Because like the guy with the gambling problem, he had a gambling problem and he said that he stopped, but it seems like he could go back. A lot of times it seems that they have problems, they run away, but it happens again, and they don't deal with the problem.
Yeah, of course, that's basically the negative side of it, right? The positive side is you have the decision, you have the choice to disappear, maybe instead of killing yourself. That's kind of a positive aspect because it saves your life. But of course, on the other hand, the negative side is that you're not facing your conflicts and your demons and your challenges, and you're basically just running away from your problems. And this causes this vicious circle that they're actually disappearing again and again and running away again. Yeah, so I agree with your opinion that this is also the case, and also true.
Also, I would like to ask a question about this. I don't know if you have this question, Anna, about mental health. You know, mental health in Japan, because here in Brazil we are more open, you know, but speaking now about mental health, is still something that faces prejudice, even though the things have been changed. So speaking of bipolar situations or depression and addiction to gambling, this is something that, you know, sometimes people get ill as a society because we have this social prejudice of facing our own conflicts, you know, directly. How do you see the situation from this perspective? And how have you handled it? Because I think it's a very sensitive situation because you're talking to real people who may have all these problems.
Yeah, it's interesting questions. And then at least like 15 years ago, like when I left Japan, I mean, I'm still going back quite often, but at the time that it's sort of that going to the, you know, psychoanalyst was regarded as taboo. And at the time, I also had a sort of mental issue. I was one of those hikikomoris actually that I, you know, didn't go out like for 3 days, and then, you know, the only time was then when I went to buy some food. I didn't want to talk to anybody, and at the time that I went to, like one of the psychiatrists in Japan, but it was very hard because I didn't want to talk about it to my, you know, friends, and then like my parents were so worried about me, and then so it was. So I think that's like really another problem in Japan, that like, you know, people just not going to the psychiatrist because they're really ashamed. And they want to hide. They also want to hide that they have children and hikikomori in their houses because they don't want to talk to the neighbors. So they pretend that they children's okay, but they are just in their house, and then at the end, like the children will probably kill the parents because they're creating the whole this very isolated the space, which is this the isolated from the society. So this is really and that is actually the project that I'm working on right now is it's about my own disappearing story in a way that I disappeared from Japan, and now I kind of want to go back to my own country and then really to see what is the situation right now, because I have experienced this isolations and and then those like a mental problem. And so what is right now in Japanese society, so it will be like my next adventures to find my own identity. Yes.
And as Flavia said, do you feel that here in Brazil, this subject is more spoken out?
What do you feel about this moment after COVID? People talk more about it or don't?
You mean in Japan? I mean, I think it's. I mean, I have heard from the people living in Japan that the situation's got worse since the COVID. Yes, but then also, there's young generations which are different from my generations, So it's, I actually don't know so much, but I think the problem hasn't changed so much. And then it's very, very difficult to change this very, like solid, like very close to society, actually. It's a Japanese society.
So thank you for this opportunity to watch this movie. Actually, this was beautiful made. That gives me the anxiety and the nervousness as I am Japanese living in Brazil for now. I kind of forget about Japanese situation, like feel those, kind of worried about how you being seen from the other people or being judged. As I'm here, I don't feel that much those different people's aspect or like being judged. And then, so this movie is very accurate, living in Japan and feeling a little bit like scared being judged. And then this is my question, actually not directors, but I want to ask how Brazilian people feel about watching this movie. As I know that this movie will have screening in Rio as well, right? And then São Paulo is kind of similar to Japan, like Tokyo. That's why Brazilian people, Paulistas, can notice this kind of feelings compared to people in Rio, but people from Rio maybe feel different.
So my question is how you here in São Paulo feel this anxiety, and now that you are, living in fear because you suffer the pressure because you have to be perfect. This is what Japanese people feel in daily life. So I would like to know from Brazilian people here, how did you feel about it, and how can you try to overcome your anxiety? Thank you very much. She has a comment about this. Or do you have a question? Well, as I said, I grew in two different cultures, and I think that many people here in São Paulo who also grew up in two different countries. My mother family is Italian and Spanish. And my stepfather was Japanese. On both sides they were Japanese, and they also spoke Japanese at home, and they were educated in Japanese, and they grew up in a little Japan here in the countryside of Brazil. But I also felt a lot of that, because of course here in Brazil we also fear to be judged. But I think that things have changed a lot, because the Japanese here in Brazil have mingled as well. That is what I feel. I think that all the people here, Japanese descent, can speak better about that. But I think that you Japanese Brazilians got what is good about Brazil culture, but also kept your Japanese culture. So, but now you are more flexible. I think that, how can I say? I think that you have more empathy to each other, and you are more indulgent with yourselves. And now, from my personal perspective, I think that the first judgment is from ourselves. So your self-judgment is something that can be good, because you are responsible. Then you keep your word. You do whatever you promise to do. This is something good about the Asians, and I admire that a lot. But on the other hand, Brazilians sometimes say that they're going to do something, and they never do it, and they are not ashamed of that. I am Brazilian, can say that, And so I think that it does depend on the situation. But I feel that here in Brazil, people are more indulgent, they are more tolerant, and sometimes too indulgent. So there is a mixture. So this is why I believe that here in São Paulo, people in Berlin, Tokyo, big cities like Rio too, they're big cities. And it's interesting because you have a mixture, and you live with people from different places, and you learn from them. And this is what I feel from my personal experience. I also see this from my nephew, who is young. He's 5% Japanese, but he's very young. So, it's difficult for you to distinguish to what extent he is Japanese or also Brazilian, because there is a mixture of all the different cultures. But I think that the Japanese also kept many of their values until the 1990s, but then with globalization, they all mixed with other things. Just a brief comment. This answer can only be given from your individual perspective. And I feel that I was born here in São Paulo. My mother was Portuguese, who came to Brazil. He raised 3 children without a father. My father came from India. So she could be ashamed at that time to be a mother who was alone, didn't have a husband. But she never was afraid. And today I can see how much my mother was really brave. And when I see a film like this, I can see that the society is very different from ours, which is very more contrived. And when you speak about something that is difficult, I think that here we are more extroverted. I went to study my master's degree in London. I had 3 friends, and they were all younger, and one of them was Japanese. And I remember that, we started the course in September. I came in December back to Brazil. Then we went back there. I was, and I gave her a big hug, and she was Hirose. And then she got straight like this. I felt that I was really, I was overreacting by seeing her. And another thing that I have to speak about anxiety. Well, I teach in filmmaking in college, and I see that many people feel like that because they had to end high school during the pandemic, and today that they are in college, they have difficulty in expressing themselves. There are some students that had to leave the classroom because they were too anxious to speak in public, because they had to study during the classes and virtual classes. So geographic location is not only the issue, there is also something else that technology also changes in the behavior of people, especially how shameful people can feel in having to speak in public. We have time for just one more question? Or maybe you two could make a comment and then we'll pass the floor to the directors for their final comments. Good afternoon. Based on your knowledge of this phenomenon of the people vanishing, is this something that is peculiar to Japan? Or is this a phenomenon that can be found similarly in other countries? For example, in Europe. Is there any similar phenomenon like that? If yes, what are the reasons for people to want to vanish to?
Yeah, I think first, yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
Then we can, and you can answer both.
Good afternoon. Well, my question is the following. During the period when you were making the film or producing the documentary, did you witness or did you notice the public authorities or governmental authorities in Japan working on any public policy in terms to address domestic violence or mental health? Some of the situations that you showed could somehow be, these situations that you showed in the film, were they somehow addressed by the public policies that were implemented by governmental authorities in some way?
Yes. So maybe I'll answer first to the first question. I think the phenomenon of disappearance is kind of a universal issue which happens in every country. Actually, in Germany, we also have a quite high number of reporting missing cases. The number is even a little bit higher than in Japan. It's like 100,000 people in Germany every year are reported missing. But what we figured out that is in Japan there's also like a high dark figure. It's like many people which are actually not reported, because not everyone in Japan can make a missing person file report. Only close family members or guardians or social workers are allowed to make a missing person report. So that's why there's actually a large number of unreported cases.
Well, yeah. So in Japan, of course, there's a certain number of this public sort of like authority which supports those or gives consultant to those people like with problems. But I also see that like the people that we met through these films, they're like very reluctant to get support from those like like a public support, because they're the one like who are really kind of isolate themselves from the society. So like they really probably like also don't trust them, or they really choose another world. Like I think it's and then there are also like homeless people in Japan, but they are actually like eligible to have a shelter and then get a social fare. But like the most of people, like I know that there's also like many people who don't get the social welfare because they really feel ashamed, and then especially because the authority will inform their the family members that they are getting the support, and they don't want that to happen. And then so it's out of a shame that they also don't want to get this social fare. So it's like there are like some supports, but like it's also like some people like who avoid them.
Thank you very much. So we have to wrap up. So I'd like to congratulate Andreas and Arata for your film. Also would like to thank you for being here together with Flavia. And thank you very much for everything that we had during this conversation. It was very good, but also From the deep bottom of my heart, I would also like to congratulate Japan Foundation and IMS for the initiative of bringing this documentary here to Sao Paulo, and also giving us the opportunity to have this conversation and also to disseminate this conversation. It was very good to come here and see, all of you here. It's really amazing to see, this is a holiday here in Brazil. It's afternoon, in a Saturday, and you all came here to see this documentary and also stayed a little bit longer with us to have this conversation. So thank you very much for this.
Thank you very much. We're very grateful to be here. If you have any contacts or friends in Rio, the film will be shown there tomorrow again, and also on the 15th of October in the Japan Foundation event. So there will be more opportunities. Thank you very much.